everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to tackle a topic that I think a lot of us are maybe a little too familiar with.
Whoa.
It's about why relationships, especially these days, seem to fizzle out faster than a firework on the 4th of July.
Yeah, I think I see where this is going. It can feel like a bit of a whirlwind sometimes, right?
Right. Exactly. So to get to the bottom of this whole thing, we're going to be looking at this really fascinating article called Why Relationships in the New Generation End Quickly.
Okay, I'm interested already. So what's the main idea here? What are we diving into specifically?
Well, right off the bat, the article points out this huge difference between how relationships were viewed in the past, like our parents' generation maybe, and how they're seen now.
Yeah, it's funny because you always hear those stories about how couples back in the day were expected to stay together no matter what, till death do us part and all that.
Right, like it was some kind of ironclad contract.
Totally.
Yeah.
But the article, it doesn't just dismiss that as, those old-fashioned folks. It actually digs into the social context of the time.
Yeah.
Back then, marriage was, it was almost like a necessary step, a marker of adulthood and respectability.
Yeah, like you weren't a real grown-up until you were hitched.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was so much pressure to fit into that mold, even if it meant sacrificing your own personal happiness.
Now it feels like the whole script has flipped. The article talks about this big cultural shift where individual happiness and, personal fulfillment, they've kind of taken center stage.
Right. It's almost like we're saying, hey, if this relationship isn't adding to my life, if it's not helping me grow, then see you later.
Exactly. And the article makes this point that this shift isn't just, some random thing that millennials invented.
Oh, for sure. It's actually connected to bigger societal changes that have been happening for a while now. Think about it. We're living in a world that's all about, be yourself, follow your dreams, express your individuality.
Yeah, you're totally right. And so those ideas, they start to spill over into how we view relationships, too.
Totally. So it's not that relationships are less important now. It's more like they're being weighed against all these other goals that are suddenly, maybe they're not suddenly, but they feel more prominent.
It's like our to-do list for life just got a whole lot longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like travel the world, launch that startup, find yourself, and also find true love.
Right. Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay, but the article doesn't let social media off the hook either. It kind of throws some shade its way, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Social media, it definitely plays a role. But it's complicated. You can't just say it's all bad, right?
Okay, so break it down for us. What's the deal with social media and relationships? Give us the lowdown.
Well, the way I see it, social media, it's kind of like, it's like this giant highlight reel,
A highlight reel.
Yeah. Think about it. Everyone's posting, those picture-perfect date nights, those romantic getaways, those anniversary messages that are so sweet they could give you a toothache.
Yeah, the ones that make you want to simultaneously throw up and cry because your own love life feels so dull in comparison.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing, we're only seeing a tiny sliver of reality. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you're saying it's not the whole picture.
No, not even close. Real relationships, come on, we all know they have their ups and downs, right? They have those awkward moments, the disagreements, the not so glamorous parts.
But we don't see that on Instagram, do we?
Nope. And that's where the trouble starts. Because you start comparing your relationship with all its, real life messiness to these idealized versions online. And that's a recipe for feeling like you're settling or like you're missing out.
So you get that grass is always greener feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. And it makes it harder to appreciate what you have, and to stick it out when things get a little rough. Because you're always wondering, is there something better out there? Is someone else having more fun than me?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's not even just about, comparing ourselves to others. The article also talks about how, our actual expectations for what a relationship should be have changed. Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not just about, those picture-perfect images. It's about, our fundamental ideas of what we're looking for in a partner.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, in the past, it seemed like relationships were more about, finding someone who complemented your life, somebody you could build a future with, have kids with, grow old with. It was about accepting imperfections and working through challenges together.
So you're in it for the long haul, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But now it feels like there's this pressure to find like the perfect match right from the start.
Yeah.
Someone who aligns with, with all your values, all your interests, your lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't feel that instant, like fireworks and butterflies, well, then it's a no-go.
So it's less about growing together and more about like finding someone who's already a finished product.
Yeah, kind of. And the problem with that is, well, it's rare, right? It's rare to find someone who checks all the boxes right away. Real relationships, they take time to, to figure things out, to navigate differences, to work through those, inevitable conflicts.
Yeah.
To discover, those deeper layers that you might not see at first glance.
It makes you wonder if we're so focused on finding someone who's like already perfect that we're missing out on, well, on the beauty of actually growing and evolving together as a couple.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that I think we're going to explore more as we continue to dig into this article and all its insights and ideas.
Okay, so we've been talking about how our expectations about relationships have, well, kind of shifted, right? But it seems like it's not just about finding that quote-unquote perfect match anymore,
Yeah.
It's like the article seems to be saying that our priorities have changed in a way that makes relationships, especially romantic ones, seem, I don't know, maybe less central to our lives overall.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. It's not necessarily that we don't value love or connection.
Right.
It's more like, well, there's so many other things vying for our attention these days.
Totally. Like,
Yeah.
what? Building a career, traveling the world, becoming a yoga master.
Exactly. And all of those things, they're great. They're important.
Mm.
But they can also take up a lot of time and energy.
So much time and
Yeah.
energy. And then it's like, where does a relationship even fit into all of that?
Right. And it's easy to fall into this trap of thinking, oh, if I get into a serious relationship now, it's going to like derail all my other plans.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I can't travel the world if I'm tied down with a boyfriend, or I need to focus on my career, not on date nights.
Exactly. I've definitely felt that tension myself. Like, is a relationship going to hold me back from achieving all the things I want to do?
I feel that. And the article actually talks about how, like, millennials are more likely to delay marriage and, starting a family so they can focus on those other goals.
Yeah, it's a whole different mindset from, like, our parents' generation,
Totally. And I think it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's awesome that people are prioritizing their own growth and aspirations. But it does make you wonder, like, how do we balance all of that with that human need for connection and intimacy?
That's the key question, isn't it? Like, how do we find that sweet spot where we're pursuing our dreams but also leaving space for love?
Right. It's like we're trying to figure out how to, I don't know, like squeeze a relationship into our already overflowing schedules instead of seeing it as this like essential part of a meaningful life.
It's almost like it's an afterthought sometimes.
And then on top of all that, there's this whole thing about like fear of vulnerability and commitment, which the article talks about a lot.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It seems like, I don't know, maybe we're just more scared of getting hurt than like our parents were or something.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, there are a few theories about why that might be,
Okay, tell me. Why are we all so scared of love?
Well, for one thing, I think we've just like witnessed a lot more relationship breakdowns, like in our own lives, in our families, among our friends.
Divorce is like way more common than it used to be.
Exactly. And it's not just divorce. It's like people breaking up after a few months, a few weeks even. It's almost like we've become, I don't know, almost desensitized to the idea of heartbreak.
Yeah, it's almost expected, Like, oh, another relationship bites the dust.
Right. And then there's social media, which is, well, it's a whole other beast. We're constantly bombarded with stories of infidelity, betrayals, all the messy parts of relationships.
Oh, yeah, and everyone airing their dirty laundry online for the whole world to see.
It's a lot. And it can make it hard to, like, believe in lasting love.
Yeah. Totally. Like, if everyone's breaking up, why even bother, right?
And then you add in the rise of, like, casual dating culture, where commitment is, where it's often seen as, like, this optional thing.
Yeah.
Or even, a bad thing.
Yeah, like, keep it casual, keep it light, don't catch feelings.
Exactly. It's no wonder people are, like, hesitant to let their guard down.
Yeah.
To really invest in a relationship.
So everyone's just out there, like, protecting their hearts, afraid to get too close.
It's like a defense mechanism.
Okay, but the article also talks about situationships. Right. What are those exactly?
Yeah, those are interesting. They're kind of like this undefined in-between space where you're, spending time with someone, maybe even, sleeping with them.
Hooking up.
Yeah, exactly. But you're not officially, like, dating or in a committed relationship.
So it's like a relationship, but not really a relationship.
Yeah, kind of. And they can be so confusing emotionally.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it. I feel like I've been in like a million situationships.
Right. It's like you're getting some of the benefits of a relationship, but without the security and the commitment.
And it's almost like we're afraid to actually define the relationship, because then we'd have to like be vulnerable, take a risks.
I think you're onto something there. It's like we want the connection, but without the potential for, heartbreak.
But the article makes it pretty clear that avoiding vulnerability altogether, well, that's not really a solution either, right?
Nope, not at all. In fact, it can actually prevent us from experiencing the real joy and fulfillment that comes from a deep, meaningful connection.
So how do we find that balance? How do we want connection, but also not be terrified of getting hurt? Is that even possible?
That is the question, isn't it? The million-dollar question. And I think the article does a really good job of reminding us that there isn't one easy answer.
No magic formula for love.
Right. Exactly. But it does offer, some really, really valuable insights that can help us navigate all this complexity, with a little more awareness, a little more intentionality.
Okay, so give it to me straight. What are these golden nuggets of wisdom? What's going to help us, crack the code of modern love?
All right. Well, I think the first thing, the most important thing, is to really challenge those unrealistic expectations that we've picked up along the way.
Unrealistic expectations.
From social media, from movies, honestly, from our own past experiences.
Okay, yeah, I get that. No relationship is perfect, and comparing yourself to, those Instagram couples is just setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. It's come on. Those are just snapshots.
Right, perfectly filtered snapshots.
Exactly. But what about those deeper expectations? Those ideas about finding someone who's already complete or who aligns perfectly with every single one of your values. How do we even begin to work with that?
Yeah, that's the tough one.
I think it starts with remembering that relationships they're about growth, both individually and as a couple.
Growth.
Yeah. So instead of desperately searching for someone who, checks every single box on your list.
Right.
Maybe we should be a little more open to the idea of finding someone who inspires us to become better versions of ourselves.
I like that. Finding someone who challenges you to grow in ways you never even thought of before.
It's exactly. Someone who pushes you outside your comfort zone a little bit.
And that requires vulnerability, right?
100%. I mean, vulnerability it's the foundation of intimacy and trust.
Yeah.
It's about being willing to share your true self. Your hopes, your fears, even those parts of yourself that you don't love so much.
It's scary though.
It can be, yeah. Especially if you've been hurt before. But the article really drives home this point that avoiding vulnerability altogether, in the long run, it actually does more harm than good.
Right. You build a wall around your heart.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe you protect yourself from getting hurt, but you also shut out all the good stuff too.
Exactly. You can't experience true intimacy without taking a little bit of a risk.
So how do we do that? How do we cultivate more vulnerability in our relationships and in ourselves, I guess?
Well, I think it starts with baby steps. Maybe it's sharing something with your partner that you've never told anyone else before. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's just, being more honest about your needs, your desires.
Right, actually saying what you want.
Exactly. Even if it feels a little awkward or uncomfortable at first.
And that takes communication, real honest communication.
Oh, yeah. Communication is key. And I think that's something that we could all stand to work on a little bit.
Okay, so big picture here. What does all this mean for us, the listeners? What should we be taking away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that, relationships might be ending faster these days, but it's not necessarily all doom and gloom.
Okay, good. Because I was starting to get a little depressed.
No, it's not like that. It just means that we need to be more mindful, more intentional about the kinds of relationships we want to create, and more willing to put in the effort.
So instead of blaming social media or the dating apps or whatever, we need to look inward a little bit.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what are your values? What are you really looking for in a partner? And are you Are you truly ready to be vulnerable, to open yourself up to the possibility of getting hurt?
Deep stuff. Lots to think about.
It is, but it's important stuff.
It is. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to break all of this down for us.
Of course, my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.